The cold wind cut my face as I walked along the city sidewalk. The cloudy sky carried shades of gray that seemed to reflect my own state of mind. I had just left the courthouse, and I still felt the tension of that hearing that didn't end as I expected. My boots echoed against the concrete wet from the recent rain, each step seeming to amplify the feeling of vulnerability that had haunted me since I left military service. Suddenly, a group of people gathered on the corner, their voices forming an almost deafening hum. A car passed slowly, and I could see in people's eyes a mixture of curiosity and contempt. I felt that familiar chill run down my spine. The feeling of being judged, of being invisible, of being considered fragile simply because my routine was now civilian and peaceful, far from the battlefields that shaped me. A tall man dressed in an impeccable dark suit got out of the car and approached. There was something in his gaze, an almost palpable arrogance, and the instant our eyes met, I felt that this night would turn into something I would never forget. He smiled condescendingly, and I understood that I was about to be disrespected in a way that went far beyond words. "Look who it is, the great war hero," he said mockingly, laughing as he pointed to my service medal, which I discreetly wore on my coat lapel. "I bet you still think you can fight anyone here." His laughter echoed in the empty street, cutting through the heavy silence of the night. People around began to whisper, some even taking pictures with their cell phones. I felt the weight of their stares on me. A collective judgment that didn't know my story, that didn't understand the price I paid for their freedom, or for my own invisible scars. I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger and disgust bubbling inside me. I remembered the endless nights in distant camps, the friends who never returned, the orders I received, and those I had to give, the decisions that shaped lives, including my own. Everything seemed to converge on that moment, an unexpected confrontation right there on the sidewalk, with an arrogant lawyer who believed he could reduce my story to a joke. He took a step forward, as if challenging me was the most natural thing in the world. His colleagues laughed, some taking photos, others recording videos. The sound of their voices mingled with the wind blowing through the narrow streets, creating a suffocating and electric atmosphere. I felt my muscles tense, my mind instinctively recalling training, combat tactics, high-risk situations. But here there was no battle, only the silence of injustice about to engulf me. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. I could hear my own breathing, feel my heart pounding against my chest. My hands were steady, although my whole body screamed for action, for a response. I was a veteran, yes, but also a man tired of external battles, trying to survive the invisible battles of civilian life. And at that moment I realized that the war I would face there was not with weapons, but with dignity, patience, and perhaps a little of the cunning that life and the army had taught me. The lawyer, with his mocking smile, took a step closer, almost touching my shoulder with his index finger, a gesture laden with provocation. Then, the scene changed subtly but profoundly. A distant siren, the clinking of a trash can being knocked over by the wind, and something inside me clicked. It was no longer just a public humiliation. It was a test to see if, after everything I had lived through, I could still maintain my calm, my control, my sense of justice. And there, in the middle of that dark street, surrounded by curious glances and cruel laughter, I realized that something unexpected was about to happen, something that would change everyone's perception of me, and that would make it clear that despite age, scars, and tested patience, a veteran still knows how to fight. The next moment would be decisive, and I knew he would never forget what was about to happen. I am a veteran, not just because of the uniform I wore, but because of the scars, visible and invisible, that the war left on me. I grew up in a small town, where everyone knew everyone else's name, but few knew the depth of each other's stories. Before the conflict, my life was simple. School, soccer with friends, long walks along the river with my father, afternoons when my mother baked that homemade bread that I can still smell when I close my eyes. But everything changed when I decided to enlist. Recruitment wasn't just a choice, it was a need to prove something to myself. Entering military service meant discipline, honor, and a greater purpose. And at first, it seemed like a clear, almost heroic path. Intense training, dawn runs, strategy and survival classes, cold nights awake in makeshift camps. Each day was a test of physical and mental endurance. I learned to carry weight I never imagined, to endure pain I didn't even know existed, to remain calm when everything around me seemed to crumble. When I was finally sent to the front, the reality of war hit me with overwhelming force. It wasn't just explosions and gunfire. It was the empty stares of lost comrades, the constant feeling that at any moment I could be next, and the need for quick decisions that determined life or death. I saw friends fall beside me, heard screams that are etched in my mind, smelled smoke and blood, felt the cold of endless dawns and the suffocating heat of deserts that burned the skin. Each mission left marks that no one outside the battlefield could understand. There were days when fear seemed to overwhelm me, but I learned to transform it into focus. I trained my body and mind to react without hesitation, to protect those around me. Each medal I carry is not just a piece of metal. It is a symbol of the lives I tried to save, the choices I had to make, and the losses I can never erase. It is the memory of each comrade who did not return home, of each sleepless night, of each heavy silence between the gunfire and explosions. After years of service, I returned to civilian life, believing that the transition would be smooth. But the war doesn't end when you cross the finish line. It continues inside you. The city streets now seemed both familiar and strange at the same time. Everyday sounds like horns and sirens reminded me of the explosions. Passing through crowds gave me a feeling of invisibility, while memories of camaraderie and sacrifice mingled with the isolation of daily routine. Living with these memories is a constant exercise in emotional resilience. Some nights I wake up in a cold sweat, still hearing echoes of orders I gave or received. Other nights, I feel a deep sadness for the friends I will never see again. But I also carry with me invaluable lessons: courage, resilience, loyalty, and the understanding that life is precious and fragile. Every gesture of kindness I encounter now, every genuine smile carries a different weight because I have learned to value what I once took for granted. And that is why I am here, on that street, facing the contempt of an arrogant lawyer. Because despite all the ghosts of the past, the pain and the loss, I am still capable of confronting injustice. Because war taught me that dignity is not measured by what others think of you, but by what you know to be true within yourself. And in that instant, surrounded by skeptical stares and malicious laughter, I knew that my story could not be denied. That my military past, my courage, and my life experience would give me the strength to face any challenge, no matter how humiliating it seemed. Even tired, even scarred, even alone in the crowd, I felt that there was still something inside me that could never be defeated. And in that moment between the tension and the contempt, I realized that my whole life had prepared me for this. Not only to survive, but to rise up and show unexpectedly that no one could underestimate a veteran who still carries the war within him. The tension on the sidewalk didn't lessen. On the contrary, it seemed to grow with each passing second. The lawyer remained before me with that mocking smile, surrounded by colleagues who seemed eager to witness my humiliation. People around whispered, some recording videos with their cell phones, others simply observing as if it were a spectacle. It was at that moment that I realized the cruel reality. It wasn't just an individual confrontation, but a social injustice that went far beyond me. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure, while my mind replayed the events that had brought me there. I was in that place because of a legal dispute that, for me, was fair and necessary. I was defending an unjustly treated neighbor, a simple man who, like me, had served society in ways that many would never understand. But there, on the sidewalk, I realized that it wasn't just my case that was at stake. My own dignity was being tested. The lawyer took a step forward, pointing to my service medal as if it were a joke. "So this is what you think it's worth?" he asked, with a mocking tone that made my nerves throb. "An old medal and some stories? Seriously?" His voice echoed between the buildings, laden with contempt, and the laughter around only increased the weight of the situation. I felt anger rising, mixed with a deep weariness. Inside, my body automatically remembered the risky situations I faced in military service. Adrenaline, tension, the chill down my spine. But I was unarmed, without physical training at that moment. Just me, my experience, my memories, and my patience. And I knew I needed to choose between reacting with violence or using something even more powerful, my story, my truth. As I pondered, I noticed curious glances among the crowd. Some seemed interested, others condescending. But there were also those who understood nothing, who simply judged by what they saw on the surface. And it was at that moment that I understood the magnitude of the conflict. I was not only fighting against the arrogant lawyer, but against collective judgment, against social contempt, against the inability of many to see beyond appearances. The feeling of injustice was almost palpable. The cold wind blowing through the street seemed to carry each mocking word directly into me. I felt the presence of the battlefields in my mind again, the noise of the bombs, the shouts of friends, the tension of each decision that could save or destroy lives. But this time, there were no weapons, no trained allies by my side, only my courage, my patience, and the ability to withstand humiliation. And then came the moment that made everything even more challenging. A group of passers-by began to approach, some murmuring derogatory comments, others curious to see how far it would go. The lawyer seemed to gain confidence, believing that his arrogance and the attentive gazes of the crowd were enough to intimidate me. He raised his voice, repeating jokes about my military past, about my scars, about what he called exaggerated war stories. Each word was a blade cutting my patience, but I knew that any hasty reaction could worsen the situation. It was at that moment that I realized that the real battle was not physical, but moral and emotional. I was being tested. Would I be able to maintain my dignity and face the contempt without debasing myself? Would I be able to use my history, my experience, and my truth to turn the situation in my favor? The adrenaline of the past mixed with the tension of the present, and I felt the same kind of focus I had in the critical moments of military service. Then a sudden silence took over the street. The wind stopped for a moment, and it seemed that even the city was holding its breath. I knew that the situation had reached its breaking point. Everything depended on how I would react in the next few seconds. And at that moment I understood that the initial conflict was not just about me or about the lawyer. It was about respect, justice, and a veteran's ability to show that, even after so many battles, he still knew how to fight in an unexpected, powerful, and memorable way. The lawyer's laughter seemed to multiply in the cold street air, reverberating between the buildings like a cruel echo. He approached even closer, without any concern for limits, as if he were untouchable. Each of his steps was a calculated provocation, and the crowd's gazes, once curious, now mingled with scorn and entertainment at the expense of my humiliation. It was as if I were a play, and he the mocking protagonist staging a spectacle of contempt. "Look at that," he said, raising his finger in my direction. "The great American hero. I bet he thinks he can still command troops with that serious look, doesn't he?" And he laughed loudly, mocking my service medal that gleamed discreetly in the dim streetlight. "He's nothing but a tired old man, with war stories that nobody here will believe." The weight of his words fell on me like a cold blade. Each syllable seemed to cut through my patience, my pride, my dignity. I felt the crowd close in around me, an invisible barrier of judgmental stares and critical whispers. Some were recording videos, others were pointing, as if they wanted to prove they were witnessing the downfall of someone who, once a hero, had been. There were muffled laughs, some malicious, others nervous, and the sound pierced my ears like gunshots. I tried to ignore it, take a deep breath, stay calm. But the memory of the nights in the desert, the cold dawns in makeshift trenches, the lost friends, resurfaced forcefully. Each memory was a reminder that I had survived much more than the scorn of an arrogant lawyer or the judgment of the crowd. However, the emotional pain was different. It was public, humiliating, and merciless. It was proof that even a veteran could be underestimated, ridiculed, and put to the test without weapons. A woman in the crowd giggled, pointing at me and whispering to her friend. A man was recording everything with his cell phone, muttering jokes and repeating the lawyer's taunts. I felt the fury mix with sadness, a combination of emotions reminiscent of the most intense moments of combat. But now without the adrenaline of survival, only the weight of injustice. Each of their words pierced my mind like invisible bullets, and I knew I needed to react, but not in the way they expected. The lawyer took another step forward, now very close, almost touching my shoulder. "I bet you still think you have authority, huh?" he said, smiling arrogantly. His voice was firm, each word laden with scorn, each gesture a silent challenge. He believed that his position and the surrounding public were enough to reduce me to dust, to make me a ridiculous figure. But something inside me ignited at that moment, a flame reminiscent of the darkest days on the front lines, when every decision could save lives. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for a reaction, whether of submission or confrontation. My heart was racing, my muscles tensed, and my mind reviewed every strategy I had learned over the years of military service. But the battle I was facing now wasn't physical. It was moral, emotional, psychological. It was a silent war against prejudice, against hasty judgment, against the arrogance that thinks experience and courage can be ignored. Then, something unexpected happened. A child in the crowd looked directly at me, his large, curious eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and admiration. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The lawyer's laughter, the whispers, the critical glances, everything disappeared, and only the innocent gaze of that child remained. I felt a wave of responsibility, a vivid reminder of why I had become a soldier. To protect the defenseless, to act with courage, to maintain dignity even in the most adverse situations. It was then that I realized, the contempt didn't matter. The mockery didn't matter. It didn't matter how many people were recording and laughing. My story, my scars, my experiences, all of that gave me a strength that no one could take away. The moment of public humiliation became a testing ground, where I had to prove that respect and courage are not just memories, but actions that manifest themselves when you least expect them, transforming pain into silent and impactful power. The lawyer was still laughing, unaware that the humiliation he believed he controlled was about to turn around. I just took a deep breath, looked at him firmly, and a thought crystallized. Everything would change now. The turnaround was coming. For a moment, the world seemed to move in slow motion. I breathed deeply, feeling every heartbeat, every tension in my muscles. The lawyer was still laughing, confident that his mockery had reduced me to nothing. But in that instant, something inside me stirred. It wasn't pure anger nor despair. It was the memory of what it truly means to have courage, of what I learned on the battlefields. That true strength lies not in intimidation, but in unexpected action and the power of truth. Then, I looked around and saw something that no one else noticed. One of the passers-by, who had remained neutral until then, approached the lawyer with a serious look. He was an older man, perhaps someone who knew my past or who respected military service. He spoke firmly but without raising his voice. "Sir, I think you don't understand who you're dealing with." The crowd began to murmur, curious about the sudden change in posture. And then, my medal gleamed in the dim streetlights, drawing attention to the symbol that represented more than honor. It represented sacrifice, courage, and commitment to the truth. I felt a shiver run through my body, a mixture of tension and anticipation. People began to realize, slowly, that this man who seemed to be just a target of mockery was, in fact, someone with a story that no one there fully knew. "He served his country," said another passerby, now gathering the courage to speak publicly. "He fought, he suffered, he lost friends, and yet he's here, trying to do justice for others, without needing applause or recognition." The lawyer stopped, surprised, his arrogant smile faltering. The crowd began to change its tone. Some people who had previously laughed now looked with restrained respect, others murmured words of admiration. It was then that I approached, maintaining a firm posture, my breathing controlled. I looked directly into his eyes and said in a low but firm voice, "You think you know me? That you understand my story after a few minutes of mockery? You understand nothing." A heavy silence filled the street. Each syllable seemed to echo in the air, laden with dignity and truth. The lawyer, visibly disconcerted, tried to laugh again, but the laughter died in his throat. The crowd now turned to me, some registering the change in posture, others simply observing, fascinated by the transformation of the moment. I realized that, at that instant, the narrative had turned. It was no longer me being humiliated. It was the opportunity to show everyone that true experiences and values are not measured by mockery or the superficial judgment of the crowd. And then, something even more unexpected happened. One of the audience members, a young lawyer from the mocker's own team, stepped forward, looking at his colleague with an expression of embarrassment and respect. "Perhaps we should reconsider our stance," he said, lowering his voice but firmly. "This man is not here just to be ridiculed. He has a history, he has dignity, and he deserves to be heard." The tension in the air turned into expectation. The crowd was now divided, some silent, reflecting on what they had just heard, others still surprised, realizing the difference between appearance and reality. My body was tense, but my mind was calm. I remembered the lessons of war, patience, observation, and the ability to act at the right moment when the opportunity arises unexpectedly. And then came the decisive moment. The lawyer, realizing that the tide had turned, tried to react with words, but his voice trembled. He could no longer control the situation, because now it wasn't just him against me. It was the truth that prevailed. The silent respect that began to emerge from the crowd. The recognition that arrogance and scorn could not erase decades of experience and sacrifice. I felt a wave of relief and determination simultaneously. The turnaround was not only my silent victory, but a lesson for everyone around. That courage and dignity, even in the face of public contempt, can turn the tide in unexpected ways. And in that instant, as glances shifted and the atmosphere transformed, I realized that the true battle had been won, not by force, but by the power of truth, of history, and of the unwavering presence of those who refuse to be subjugated. The next moment I knew would be the consolidation of respect and justice. That instant that would define everyone's perception of me and my military past. The true test of courage was about to manifest itself in an even more impactful way. The silence that settled over the street after the turnaround seemed almost sacred. The crowd didn't know exactly how to react. Some looked at me with newfound respect. Others were still trying to process the sudden change in the dynamics of the situation. The lawyer, who until minutes ago had boasted in his mockery, was now visibly disconcerted. He had lost control of what he believed to be an easy humiliation. "Sir, he began, stammering, unable to form a complete sentence. The arrogance had vanished, replaced by a discomfort that only the perception of one's own failure could provoke. His mask of confidence evaporated, revealing a man who, like everyone there, underestimated the weight of the experience, dignity, and history of a veteran. And it was at that moment that true justice manifested itself, not in words, but in actions. A judge who was passing by on the street, attracted by the commotion and murmurs, approached. He immediately recognized my medal and made a discreet gesture of respect, which did not go unnoticed by anyone. He spoke in a firm voice, addressing the lawyer and the crowd. "You are all standing before someone who has dedicated his life to service, who has faced dangers that most of you will never know. What has happened here is a lesson in humility for everyone." The crowd began to applaud, first timidly, then more intensely. Laughter and mockery gave way to expressions of respect and recognition. I felt a strange emotion rise through my body, a mixture of relief, pride, and a silent gratitude for those who, even unexpectedly, defended the truth. Every gaze now carried admiration, and I realized that my story was finally being recognized as it deserved. The lawyer, ashamed, retreated, unable to argue. His colleagues looked away, aware that they could no longer maintain their arrogant posture in the face of the clear evidence of who I was. My presence, my experience, and my story now spoke louder than any mockery. Justice, symbolically but powerfully, had been established. As I watched the crowd's reaction, I felt it wasn't just about me. It was an affirmation that truth, courage, and integrity have the power to change perceptions, even amidst scorn and mockery. That silent victory wasn't just personal, but a reminder to everyone there. Respect isn't demanded with arrogance, but earned with action, character, and presence. The recognition was complete when some people in the crowd began sharing accounts of their own experiences with veterans or relatives who had served. The stories mingled with mine, creating an atmosphere of reverence and reflection. At that moment, I felt a deep connection with each person there. Not just with those who finally respected me, but with those who, in some way, also carried invisible battles. I felt my muscles relax, my heart, though still racing, find a more serene rhythm. Every scar, every painful memory, every sleepless night, every loss suffered. Everything had led to that moment when justice manifested itself clearly, unequivocally, and powerfully emotionally. I didn't need applause or gratitude. My recognition came from the simple fact that my truth had finally been seen and respected. And at the same time, I realized that this experience not only restored my dignity, but also reminded me of the value of every action I had taken throughout my life. Justice at that moment was more than legal or symbolic. It was human, moral, and profound. Each person present was confronted with the reality that underestimating someone because of their appearance or position is always a mistake, and that courage, experience, and history have a weight that cannot be measured by mockery or sarcasm. As I walked slowly down the street, still feeling the respectful gazes upon me, I realized that life often presents moments when dignity needs to assert itself silently, firmly, and inevitably. And on that day, amidst the chaos, the scorn, and the contempt, I was reminded that, even marked by the past, a veteran can transform humiliation into recognition, mockery into respect, and injustice into victory. For a moment, the world seemed to move in slow motion. I breathed deeply, feeling every heartbeat, every tension in my muscles. The lawyer was still laughing, confident that his mockery had reduced me to nothing. But in that instant, something inside me stirred. It wasn't pure anger nor despair. It was the memory of what it truly means to have courage. of what I learned on the battlefields. That true strength lies not in intimidation, but in unexpected action and the power of truth. Then, I looked around and saw something that no one else noticed. One of the passers-by, who had remained neutral until then, approached the lawyer with a serious look. He was an older man, perhaps someone who knew my past or who respected military service. He spoke firmly but without raising his voice. "Sir, I think you don't understand who you're dealing with." The crowd began to murmur, curious about the sudden change in posture. And then, my medal gleamed in the dim streetlights, drawing attention to the symbol that represented more than honor. It represented sacrifice, courage, and commitment to the truth. I felt a shiver run through my body, a mixture of tension and anticipation. People began to realize, slowly, that this man who seemed to be just a target of mockery was, in fact, someone with a story that no one there fully knew. "He served his country," said another passerby, now gathering the courage to speak publicly. "He fought, he suffered, he lost friends, and yet he's here, trying to do justice for others, without needing applause or recognition." The lawyer stopped, surprised, his arrogant smile faltering. The crowd began to change its tone. Some people who had previously laughed now looked with restrained respect, others murmured words of admiration. It was then that I approached, maintaining a firm posture, my breathing controlled. I looked directly into his eyes and said in a low but firm voice, "You think you know me? That you understand my story after a few minutes of mockery? You understand nothing." A heavy silence filled the street. Each syllable seemed to echo in the air, laden with dignity and truth. The lawyer, visibly disconcerted, tried to laugh again, but the laughter died in his throat. The crowd now turned to me, some registering the change in posture, others simply observing, fascinated by the transformation of the moment. I realized that, at that instant, the narrative had turned. It was no longer me being humiliated. It was the opportunity to show everyone that true experiences and values are not measured by mockery or the superficial judgment of the crowd. And then, something even more unexpected happened. One of the audience members, a young lawyer from the mocker's own team, stepped forward, looking at his colleague with an expression of embarrassment and respect. "Perhaps we should reconsider our stance," he said, lowering his voice but firmly. "This man is not here just to be ridiculed. He has a history, he has dignity, and he deserves to be heard." The tension in the air turned into expectation. The crowd was now divided, some silent, reflecting on what they had just heard, others still surprised, realizing the difference between appearance and reality. My body was tense, but my mind was calm. I remembered the lessons of war, patience, observation, and the ability to act at the right moment when the opportunity arises unexpectedly. And then came the decisive moment. The lawyer, realizing that the tide had turned, tried to react with words, but his voice trembled. He could no longer control the situation, because now it wasn't just him against me. It was the truth that prevailed. The silent respect that began to emerge from the crowd. The recognition that arrogance and scorn could not erase decades of experience and sacrifice. I felt a wave of relief and determination simultaneously. The turnaround was not only my silent victory, but a lesson for everyone around. That courage and dignity, even in the face of public contempt, can turn the tide in unexpected ways. And in that instant, as glances shifted and the atmosphere transformed, I realized that the true battle had been won, not by force, but by the power of truth, of history, and of the unwavering presence of those who refused to be subjugated. The next moment I knew would be the consolidation of respect and justice. That instant that would define everyone's perception of me and my military past. The true test of courage was about to manifest itself in an even more impactful way. The air seemed to vibrate around me. The street, once just a scene of contempt and scorn, was now transformed into a stage of tension that could be cut with a hand. The lawyer, symbolically defeated, still breathed with residual arrogance, but there was a thread of fear in his eyes, that silent fear that arises when someone realizes they have profoundly underestimated another person's experience and strength. I could feel it, just as I could feel the weight of all the eyes on me, waiting for the next move, waiting for the outcome of what seemed to have no way out for them. My heart was racing, but my mind was crystal clear. Every memory of the war, every risky mission, every decision made under extreme pressure now aligned, reminding me that the real battle, the one that defines honor and courage, often happens when least expected, in situations that challenge both principles and physical strength. And there I was, surrounded by an expectant crowd, facing a silent confrontation that demanded absolute control. Control of anger, pride, and fear. The lawyer, without realizing it, took the step that would trigger the climax of the entire situation. He tried to interrupt me with sharp words, attempting to regain some power he believed he still possessed. "You won't intimidate me with old stories," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "This is my space, and I decide what happens here." It was at that moment that the tension reached its peak. The crowd held its breath as if they knew something big was about to happen. I felt a mixture of adrenaline and clarity that only those who have been through situations of extreme risk recognize. It was the instant when everything could fall apart. When any thoughtless movement could put me at a disadvantage, not physically but emotionally and morally. Each second seemed eternal, carrying within it the weight of all the previous injustices and humiliations. Then I took a deep breath and let my presence speak for me. There were no shouts, no exaggerated gestures, just a calm firmness that emanated from every inch of my body. I looked the lawyer in the eye and said in a firm voice, almost whispered, but clear enough for everyone to hear, "Do you think you can measure my life with words? Measure my experience with mockery." An absolute silence filled the street. Everything you see here is the result of choices, of sacrifices, of responsibilities that you would never understand. The crowd was now completely silent, absorbing every word, feeling the intensity of the moment. The wind blew unevenly, carrying with it the distant sound of sirens and the damp smell of recent rain. Every sensory detail seemed to amplify the drama. The cold on my skin, the echo of words in the air, the invisible weight of all the past experiences I carried. The lawyer took a step back, now visibly shaken. His colleagues, who had previously been laughing and recording videos, began to exchange worried glances. There was a collective perception that something bigger was happening, something that transcended that personal confrontation. A lesson about respect, dignity, and recognition of human value. And then, in that critical moment, I realized I didn't need to prove anything more with words or actions. The tension had reached its peak, and the power of truth, experience, and integrity had already manifested itself. The crowd, the passers-by, everyone who witnessed the moment, could feel the change in the air. Humiliation had turned into reverence, contempt into admiration, scorn into silent respect. I felt my body relax just a little, but my mind remained alert. I knew that the climax wasn't just about me, but about everyone who could at that moment learn something about silent courage, about dignity, and about the strength that truth and experience possess in the face of arrogance and contempt. It was a moral, ethical, and emotional victory, consolidating all the stages of my journey from the battlefields to that urban sidewalk. And as the crowd began to absorb the magnitude of what had happened, I realized a profound clarity. True confrontation is never just external. It happens within each of us. When we have the opportunity to confront injustice with courage, patience, and dignity, transforming moments of maximum tension into irrefutable proof of strength, character, and humanity. The crowd began to slowly disperse, and the silence that settled after the tension was different from before. There was no more scorn, no more mockery, no more lukewarm curiosity. There was respect. There was recognition. Each step I took felt lighter, not because the street had changed, but because everyone's perception of me now reflected the truth I had always carried. My experience, my courage, and my dignity could not be diminished by superficial words or laughter. The lawyer, still visibly shaken, withdrew without making any further comments. His colleagues followed him, and I realized that even without saying a word, the lesson had been conveyed. Underestimating someone based on appearance or past is always a mistake. My victory was not over him, but over the collective contempt that had surrounded me for so long. The feeling of invisibility and devaluation that many veterans know well. As I walked down the street, I took a deep breath and felt the cold wind touch my face. Each breeze seemed to carry with it the echoes of war memories, mixed with the feeling of justice achieved. I realized that, more than public recognition, the greatest effect of that experience was internal, a reaffirmation of my own strength, my own resilience, Even marked by scars and traumas, I remained firm, intact in my essence, capable of facing not only adversity, but the contempt that often accompanies those who have faced life in its most extreme form. I arrived at the sidewalk where it all began and stopped for a moment. I looked around and saw the details I hadn't noticed before. The dim light of the streetlights reflecting on the wet asphalt, the distant glow of the windows of houses and shops, the sound of footsteps and conversations that were now returning to normal. Everything seemed more vivid, more meaningful, because I realized that that moment had transformed more than external perceptions. It had altered something within me. I thought of the friends I lost, the battles I survived, the nights of fear and loneliness that marked my history. Each memory took on a new meaning, not just pain, but learning, not just loss, but strength, not just suffering, but courage. Civilian life always brought different challenges than those faced on the battlefields, but now I knew I could face them with the same determination, the same firmness, the same dignity. Some passers-by who remained greeted me discreetly with respectful nods or words of silent gratitude. Those small gestures were powerful. They were genuine recognition, not superficial or forced. And I realized that sometimes the consequence of a battle is not just what is achieved, but how the perception of everyone around is transformed, inspiring respect and understanding where before there was only scorn and distrust. As I walked away, I felt a strange mixture of relief and deep reflection. The experience had not erased my scars, nor the traumas I carried, but it had put each of them into context. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The truth of my life, my choices, and my past spoke for itself. And yet the situation had served as a reminder that courage, dignity, and experience are strengths that manifest themselves not only in great deeds, but in the small battles of everyday life when the world insists on underestimating someone's worth. And for a moment, I let my thoughts return to the lessons that the war taught me. Patience, observation, strategy, and, above all, resilience. Every moment of tension, every gesture of humiliation, every look of contempt was converted into learning, into silent strength that was now reflected in my posture, in my countenance, and in the way I breathed. It was an ending but also a beginning, a reminder that life goes on, that challenges will arise again, and that with dignity and courage, it is always possible to transform humiliation into respect and contempt into recognition. As I walked away from the street, feeling the light rain touch my skin, I realized that this experience would leave marks, yes, but in a different way. Now, these weren't scars of pain or humiliation, but of strength and resilience, reminding me that a veteran, however marked by the past, can still assert their truth, their worth, and their presence in the world. And that, I thought, is something no one can ever take away from me. As I walked through the now silent streets, with the distant echo of conversations and footsteps mingling with the cold wind, a feeling of deep reflection overcame me. The experience of that day, marked by scorn, contempt, and finally recognition, showed me something that is never easy to learn. That true courage is not measured only on the battlefields, but in how we confront injustice and arrogance in our own daily lives. I felt my hands, still cold from the wind, touch the metal on my chest. It carried more than war memories. It was a reminder that every choice I made, every sacrifice I accepted, every friend I lost, shaped not only my character, but my ability to withstand the adversities of civilian life. The medal now seemed to shine not only because of past experience, but because of the silent impact my story could have on those who observed me. I remembered all the humiliations I had faced over the years. Moments when I was underestimated, rejected, ignored, or ridiculed simply for not meeting the superficial expectations of the people around me. And I realized that each of those moments had been a preparation for that instant when truth, dignity, and courage would meet in a silent but powerful climax. Life, like war, demands resilience, patience, and the ability to stand firm even in the face of public humiliation. The light rain that began to fall brought me a feeling of purification, as if each drop washed away not only the street, but also the tensions accumulated in my body and mind. Each sound, the drop of water, the breath of the wind, the distant murmur of the city, seemed to echo an essential lesson. Life is made of invisible battles, and courage manifests itself both in great actions and in the silent moments when we maintain our dignity in the face of contempt. I thought of the friends who didn't come back, the moments of fear and loss I carried, and I felt an intense connection between my past and my present. Each scar, each painful memory, each extreme experience had taught me that true strength lies not only in physical endurance, but in the ability to uphold principles, character, and humanity, even when everything around you seems to be turning against you. I also reflected on the lawyer who mocked me, on the crowd that watched the scene. I realized that each of them, directly or indirectly, received a lesson about judgment, respect, and recognition. The moral was not in humiliating him or proving superiority, but in demonstrating silently and firmly that integrity and courage have a weight that no one can ignore. That a past marked by war and sacrifice is not just a collection of stories, but a legacy of strength and resilience that manifests itself even in the most unexpected situations. As I walked feeling the cold rain soak my clothes, I understood that this lesson was also for me. That life will always present challenges, that arrogant people will try to underestimate, ridicule, and despise, but that real strength lies in remaining true to oneself, in using acquired experience to transform humiliation into respect, mockery into admiration, and injustice into learning. The final reflection, deep and silent, was clear. War, pain, loss, and humiliation do not define who we are. They only define how we choose to respond to them. And by choosing courage, dignity, and truth, it is possible not only to survive but also to teach, silently and powerfully, that respect and recognition are not asked for but earned. And as the last raindrops ran down my face, I felt a silent and firm certainty that, even marked by the past, a veteran will always carry within themselves the strength to transform any challenge into a test of character, any humiliation into recognition, and any moment of injustice into a lasting lesson. Life, with all its visible and invisible battles, goes on, and true victory lies in walking through it while remaining whole, steadfast, and human, even when the world expects you to fall.